failure is death to me. Total destruction and annihilation. And when I would be walking to a pitch, the sensations in my body would be the same sensations that I would expect someone walking to an execution line. What I've found in the last few years, because of experiences like that, even if it bombs, we're all going to learn something from that bombing. And realizing that I was fine has helped a lot in my confidence. I have a theory we all have trauma, but my theory is that entrepreneurs are the ones, oftentimes, when I've been a founder my whole life, so I'll put myself in this category, they want to change the world because the world as it is painful to them. Yeah. They need the world to change, and they need to be part of the force that does it. I'll speak for myself here. The people who are the most successful, who are trying to do the biggest things, like I dropped out of college, 23, raised $9.8 million of venture capital from Barry Weinman, a bunch of other people that were all the top investors, both in Hawaii and in Silicon Valley. And I needed that external validation for whatever reasons to not feel my wounds. Both my purpose in life and my work that I do with others is how can I remain open and present, full range of emotions, sensations, thoughts, instincts, and have an intimate relationship with the unknown as it's unfolding. And then when I work with clients, it's like, how do I help them do that? Because when they do that, their genius comes out and they'll be successful. My wife, she's been an intensive care doctor most of her life. And when we met, it's like, instead of a trauma bond, it's like a trauma healing. We both meet each other where we're at. It was something cosmic. We had like a Hindu ceremony and they talk about Krishna connecting you and that this isn't your first life with each other. And it felt that way. I felt connected forever.
Greater Good Radio, connect, learn, heal, and grow is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com. Welcome to Greater Good Radio. Today we're here with Walter Roth, the founder of Simple Lens, an executive coach, a sales coach, and kind of the person behind a lot of the leaders in Silicon Valley and high growth companies. Thank you for coming.
Great to be here.
How would you explain yourself to someone who's never met you before?
That's a tough one. I think weird. My interests in life and people and myself are usually far deeper than most people want to go or know you can go.
Oh, I'd like to go there. Like what?
Oftentimes when I'm like coaching people in sales, you know, there's teaching them sales, but then there's watching when they start to close themselves and then it impacts their sale. And so while it's like coaching on sales, you're actually watching when they close.
What do you mean close?
Close their mind, their body, their heart, their gut. So what do I mean about that? When we're open, we're like present, we're breathing, we feel, we have a connection to our intuition, into our heart, emotions, love, we feel connected. There's a wide range of possibilities in any moment, resources. We're responding, you know, we're expressing ourselves, we're sharing, we have needs. When we're closed, instead of a wide range of possibilities of thoughts, interpretations, responses, what do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. You know, I'm curious, I don't understand. We close, and oftentimes closing your mind is like becoming black and white thinking.
So like the moment you become defensive.
Exactly. We close to defend ourselves. It's like protection.
The protection.
And for some people, it's conscious. But for the majority of us, as well as those that are consciously doing it, there's semi-conscious and unconscious protections that get us to react and close to certain situations, to where we will not allow ourselves to see the full range of thoughts. We won't allow ourselves to feel the emotions, the full range of emotions, sensations. We might be completely disconnected with our body and then also our instincts and our gut. And when we close, we're not living our full potential. When we close, we're disconnecting with ourselves, and then we're disconnecting with other people. And the beauty of why I'm weird is, you know, I like to coach people in sales. I like to impact high growth companies, you know, Silicon Valley companies, like it's my special interest ever since dropping out of college.
It's like your jam.
Yeah, I raised $9.8 million over 3 rounds at around 23 years old. And I was reading books before I dropped out of college about this.
That's a long time ago.
That's a long time ago.
I'm not saying you're old, but I mean, that's a long time ago.
Oh, it's a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a large amount, especially for here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And it's always been my interest. But what I found was Another interest slash desperate need was how we, and I'll say I, open and close to life. And it was a need because I found I closed myself often. And so I'm weird because when I'm coaching people on sales, first you teach them the first principles of sales, which is pretty easy. We can go into that if you want at some point. But once they know that, I'm weird in the sense where I watch them both talking about their deals and how they answer questions that I have about their deals, but also I watch their calls. And I can get a sense for the moment that they start to close their mind, their body, their heart, their gut, and how it negatively impacts their deal. And so for some reason, when I'm talking to people, I'm like weirdly observing and connecting what's happening on this kind of tactical, theoretical level with like, what is the conscious, subconscious, or conscious, semi-conscious, and unconscious doing in terms of opening and closing. And for whatever reasons, I find it super fascinating. And like, again, weird in the sense that I can talk to someone about their deal or about their life, and how they open or close, when they open or close, will tell me about the other. So I have this saying that if it's messing up your deal, it's messing up your life. The same pattern of closing in a deal under stress, uncertainty, constraints, you're going to close when you go home with your spouse, with your kids. And it becomes like, like getting an x-ray, seeing the unseeable, where if you say, let's explore your deal, it will bring you to that place of closing. And if you slow it down and bring it to the point where right before they're totally closed, there's a conscious leaning away from whatever is happening, from whatever thoughts coming, whatever emotion, sensation.
Yeah, because it's painful.
Yeah.
It's sensing pain coming, so you're going to move unconsciously in the other direction.
Yeah. Like you're trained to ask a question because it's both in service of the prospect and yourself. It might blow up the deal, but there was never a deal there.
Yeah.
But you're both better off of, spending your time and life force elsewhere. But because you're afraid of maybe that, you won't ask.
Are you kind of referring to like the unresolved childhood trauma, or potentially like, like generational trauma that is held in the body and then pops up unconsciously in, actual life that's holding them back, or what?
So there's a wide range. I'm a big fan of first principles.
Okay.
Right? The fundamental principles, the ground truths, right? You can solve problems doing that. Everything I've been talking about closing is driven by last principles. Last principles are when growing up and our nervous system was still forming. Our brain was, half made. Things happened to us that were overwhelming, and we came to conclusions, whether they're correct or wrong, about ourselves, about others, about what's safe, what's not safe, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And these principles were hard-coded into our nervous system. So in that whole idea of conscious, semi-conscious, unconscious, the parts that's semi-conscious and unconscious, oftentimes that is trauma that's stuck in the body, that's programmed into our nervous system. Some of it is, don't have a memory of what happened, but there's like a feeling, sensation. And so, trauma can be that. And I'm the big one saying is, there's a far range of trauma. There's some traumas that are just like, wow.
You're talking about like big T or little t.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I honestly believe because we are designed to survive, to procreate and to survive, and our brain is a social brain, we could be in a great family, but if like a parent, because a fear of their kid is going to do something that's going to hurt them, they might break that connection to teach them to not do that thing. And because a brain is half being developed, even though it's out of love and protection, they might conclude, I'm not lovable.
Or neglect.
Yeah.
Neglect over like developmental trauma, that one's hard.
What do you mean by that?
I like the definition of trauma is not what happened to us, but what happens in us as a result of what happens to us, right? Like the event is traumatic. I get hit by a car, whatever it may be. I mean, I'm a military soldier, or it could be that, I'm in middle school and then my friends decide they don't want to be my friends anymore, right?
Yeah.
That's a traumatic event. It's done. But the trauma is what lives on inside. That's the emotional wound that gets stuck. It's not healed. I'm suffering in isolation for the most part. It was not able to process it properly. And now it's basically stuck. That's kind of how I'm defining that.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who are afraid to talk trauma, or they're like, that's made up, or it's like, hey, that's over. You have to deal with it, move on. I don't think a lot of people really understand what trauma is. And the way that I look at it is, actually, I read this in a book, is trauma is when, like if we're here, you're talking, I'm talking, if I can't stay present to what's happening, like you're a good guy, we have trust and connection. And if you say something that might be hurtful, I can be like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm going to explore that because maybe I'm misunderstanding. I'm present to what's happening. Trauma is when the past starts to get projected onto the future, and I'm no longer responding to the connection and the presence and the context. I'm now responding to like, people aren't trustworthy. I'm not good. So I need to like proactively assert myself, defend myself.
Gotta protect.
Yeah. And so trauma, when you think about it that way, where it's like, okay, if I'm now reacting to you, if I'm not reacting to you, but kind of something from the past, whether I'm conscious of it or semi or unconscious, that's trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see that all the time because I work as an executive recruiter also. And when people come to me unsolicited and they're like, I want to leave my job, I want to go somewhere else or so on, it's typically because it's like, I hate this freaking person or I can't stand them or so on. And then unconsciously, it's basically my bosses, my father was abusive to me and I got to get out. That's the underlying kind of piece. They may not see it right off the bat, but if it actually pops up, which it does, then it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And there's some people who do somehow get into a situation where there is a dynamic. It's like a movie. It's like, okay, who's going to play this role? I'll play this role. Who's going to play my dad? You play my dad? Okay, great. And then,
like a psychodrama.
Yeah, it's a psychodrama.
But for real.
Exactly. I think I was in a transformational workshop and they called it psychodharma.
Wow.
So you're not playing, you're actually acting out dharma,
Was it helpful?
Yeah, no, it's very helpful because the difference is instead of saying, okay, let's react the past, it's like, no, let's get into a state where we can actually see what's happening in front of us, but we know that a good majority of it is from the past.
Yeah.
And that by doing that, having permission to kind of bring out whatever kind of judgments and anger, all the energy that's coming from the past, that we allow it to come through and seeing it for what it is, and then being able to integrate it more. So it's like when that thing comes up, it's like, oh, wow, I'm really triggered. I need to take a break. Or if you're someone that I trust, I can share with you like, hey, it's kind of like parts work. It's learning how to speak for parts rather than from parts. But it takes a while to engage with people from parts to even know you're doing it from a part.
And when you're talking about parts, do you want to explain that? So for anyone who doesn't understand.
How about you? You're, I think, one of the only certified people in Hawaii to do parts work, or?
There are 2 or 3 of us.
Uh-huh.
I'm the only one on Oahu. And then I guess the way the IFS typically works is like the official trainings, it goes level 1, 2, and 3, and then you have some ancillary things around that. Yeah, so I'm the only level 3 certified person that I know of here.
Awesome.
Yeah. I don't know if that makes me anything more special.
Well,
but
I do know.
I have been through a lot of training is what it is. Yeah.
Oh, my wife is level 2,
Okay.
and she TAs level 1 and 2, and I think she's going to do level 3 pretty soon.
I should have talked to her
on
that. So is your wife a therapist then?
No, she's been an intensive care doctor most of her life.
Wow. Okay.
Integrative doctor. But she started to do ketamine-assisted therapy in a way that would take her background of being a dosing geek of a system. And right now the current...
She's doing ketamine-assisted therapy and then her other practice, or she's mainly doing that and like doing functional medicine or something?
So she's got both. She's got internal and integrative practice called coldspringmd.com. And she also has precisionbreakthroughmedicine.com, which is specifically ketamine-assisted therapy.
Okay. So is that through IV or intramuscular? Or?
So she's a total dosing geek. And so she does it through intramuscular. And she has a whole protocol where everyone else does it by weight for the most part. And a lot of times they do it where you have kind of like a trip to the moon. And what she does is she really tunes into the nervous system, and she spends up to 6 months developing trust, not just with the person, but with the parts.
Oh, wow.
And instead of using ketamine to pretty much put the parts to sleep and to then do work that's deeper,
The one thing you got to watch out about that though is if you do it and weren't willing initially, the backlash after could be bad.
Yeah. Have you come across that or?
Yeah. I mean, on myself. Yeah.
No, you're not alone.
Oh yeah.
In fact, there's a lot of times that people come to her who've done ketamine with other places and things like IFS work, and there's huge backlash.
Yeah, you got to be careful on the backlash.
And there are protocols to reduce, harm reduce, where it's like talk to your parts beforehand and get permission, but it's one of those things where it isn't a perfect approach. And so she actually will do several shots, but very small amount each time.
Okay.
As she's tuning into your psychology.
You mean in the preliminary work?
No, in the dosing.
Oh, during the dosing. Okay.
Yeah. And so she keeps you at a state. Now, this is super technical.
So you're not dropping in the K-hole?
What's that?
You're not dropping K-hole?
Her goal is that after the session, you're disappointed because you didn't have some peak experience, most likely.
Oh, that's interesting. I'll tell you why. Can I go back a little bit? So parts, right? So parts of us, we all have parts, right? Part of me says, I'm enjoying being here today. Another part of me says I should be managing my renovation. Another part says, hey, you should actually be making money on stuff and so on. Another one saying, hey, maybe you should visit your child, right? Yeah. So all of us have these kind of parts. They have their own personalities. They have their own roles, right? Some are protective in nature. Some are wounded in nature. And then we have our self, which is like our soul, our spirit, what we come in with. And that's kind of the compilation of the system. In like ketamine-assisted therapy or psychotherapy, it's interesting. You can keep somebody into that range where they're physically can feel safe enough to go to the wounds and actually process it. I think about it like surgery. Yeah, right?
It's complete surgery when you do it right.
Surgery,
like
yes.
The standard of care now is a pretty big dose, one or two, kind of, like doing it and then kind of a bumper, whatever you call it.
You talking about for ketamine?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a peak experience.
Yeah.
And what she does, and I don't want to speak for her, but my impression of it is she brings people just to that edge where they have autonomy to decide to go further or to stay back and be kind of more in like the protected, sober, what have you. And she stays there for like an hour. Because she does, several micro
That's
shots.
a while then. Yeah. Because normally ketamine is kind of quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's an experience that can be very confronting. You can be in the most critical parts. And she really emphasizes that like without therapy with it, you're really robbing yourself.
I feel that way too, because I kind of feel like for the psychedelics in general, almost like an anesthesia to an extent, right? Like if you're going to a hip surgery, you could do it with no anesthesia. It would suck super bad and it would be painful so bad, but you could do it, you know what I mean? But if you don't do the surgery while you're under, then you still have a hip problem.
Yeah.
Right? So the interesting thing when I noticed that on like ketamine kind of experience is that depending on the administration and how fast it onsets, right? Like the lozenges that are done too, they take a while, like, 10, 15, 20 minutes, sometimes like that to kind of kick in versus an intramuscular shot or an IV drip, which is pretty much instantaneous and you can kind of monitor it, right? The thing is that there's that initial kind of range where it's before you're completely dropped into, the K-hole or gone, where it's like you're gone, that a lot of that kind of conscious work can be done where unconscious can be brought conscious and you can do it because it's not so scary anymore with the right environment and the right practitioner.
Exactly. And that's why she doesn't work with people without them going to therapy.
Okay.
Most of them will go to a parts, IFS trained therapist. She works with them for up to 6 months.
She take insurance or no?
No.
So it's all cash paid?
Yep.
How much is it?
I don't know. You'd have to ask her.
I tell you, the Institute, from what I've seen, they seem open to this because medical doctors now moving into kind of this space and bridging that gap of like more like holistic medicine. It's just more helpful.
I mean, it's a systems approach, right?
Yeah.
Like you've got the body, you've got the mind, you've got the spirit, you got the psychology.
And any one part of those can make the other part sick or make the other component well.
Yeah. And also it's like, what is the goal? Like some people, the goal of the session is to go further to like the exile. So like the other part of the model is a lot of times these parts are young parts.
Yeah.
Stuck in time, reacting.
Yeah, most of the parts are young.
Yeah.
typically.
I think all of them.
Well,
mostly.
I mean, yeah.
And they're reacting to what happened in the past, and they have half a brain or a third of a brain, or, and they were powerless. And it's like giving the steering wheel to a kid and expecting them not to crash.
Well, the protectors are like that too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's exiles that are in your unconscious or semi-conscious that are always acting, but you're not aware of it. And the protectors are protecting you from going there. And so some people, they aim at having the protectors go to sleep and then going to the exiles. But for the reasons we talked about, that's not necessarily the right thing because there can be whiplash. There's a technical term
We call
for
it backlash. So what happens
firefighters.
It could be any of them. But what happens is, I guess if we want to break down kind of parts, if you break them down into like category, then we have ones that are wounded, right? So like young Evan gets yelled at before dinner because I want to have, some cookie or something. And my parents are like, no. And then we get into an argument and then I get punished. And then now I'm in the corner. And then what happens is I don't know anything other than I need my caregivers in order to stay alive. This must be my fault. So I'm bad. Something's wrong with me. I'm defective. And that becomes the burden, right? Yeah. Now I want to be able to process this burden and release it. But every time I come up with it to express it, all the pain that comes with that comes at the same time. So then the protective parts in our system, right, try to get rid of that part. They try to exile it. They try to kill it, get away from it, right, and shove it away. People say, I'm good at compartmentalizing, just put it in a compartment somewhere and it's kind of gone. And then that's what these protective parts are trying to do, right? They're trying to protect our system from having to feel this type of pain so that we can function and live. They break into two categories. One is kind of manages our life, right? The ones that make us smart and pretty and handsome and funny and athletic and successful and all that stuff. And when that doesn't work, jump in. And that's anything with an ism, right? That's drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling. Could be workaholism. Perfectionism. Could be any eating disorder. Could be any cutting, and then it could, could eventually be suicide. And if you talk to the suicidal part, it will tell you that it's just trying to help you. It's actually got a good intention. The impact, though, is questionable. So that's how the system works. And then we have that self, right? Self is you come in with it at birth, you leave with it at death. It doesn't get injured. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to know. It's just there. But whenever something dangerous happens in the system, the protective parts will jump in and cover it over the same way that clouds cover over the sky. And then if that happens long enough, we forget what self even looks like or if it's even there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's kind of a long-winded way.
You said, I don't know, and that's the long-winded way.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So if we're going to parts piece, then I have a part of me that is constantly worried about my credibility in these spaces that are mostly licensed therapists, clinical therapists that go to school, they have degrees, they go through their training, and then, their many hours and so on, and pass their tests and all that. That's typically who is in and practices this type of work. Now, actually, in IFS, you have to be a licensed clinician to go into level 1 and so on. I was in a time when you didn't. So I'm fortunate on that. So part of me is constantly worried about whether I'm being credible or not outside, because if I'm not, then another part of me that holds shame, which is like I'm bad, something's wrong with me or so on, can get activated. And then if that gets activated, then now the other parts have to jump in and try to shut it down, unless I'm in a therapeutic situation where we can allow it to express itself or so on. And then I have another part that knows, I know my stuff really well, like over well. But, they're polarized with each other a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So does that answer?
Yeah. I was really enjoying what you're saying. I think if anyone's watching this, especially if, they watch these kinds of things to learn and to, maybe because of my background, sales coach and for high growth startups, they're a founder. I think what you're saying is really like a welcome mat to people who haven't maybe had this kind of awareness or know that these kinds of things are existing. And I thought what you're saying was great. And it was at the moment, like the peak of the greatness, you're like, I don't know. And then you said, and that was long-winded. So it was interesting to experience in the present moment that and I think listeners will value what you said.
Yeah.
But it felt like there was too much energy and you had to dissipate it.
If I go back a bit, into like my background, the way that I was raised and so on is that you accomplish things, but you don't talk about it. My parents won't talk about it to us, but they may talk about it to others. So there's consequences in that of like, do I fit in or do I not fit in? Do I belong as a result of it? That is still in there. And when it comes up, it can cause worry.
Yeah.
So then that kind of phrase will come in as a protective, kind of to diffuse the situation and be like, oh, nah. You know what I mean? Like, take it or don't.
Yeah. All this great stuff I just shared with you in a proper context. This is a educational venue where people are listening because they want to learn. I'm going to kind of just almost devalue it or kind of say, just kidding.
Well, it's more that it's like, I'm not trying to brag or so on, kind of, I think, you know what I mean? And you grew up in Hawaii, right? So typically in the spaces that I've traveled throughout my youth, it's the nail that sticks out gets hammered.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't say that. Even like if you are really awesome, like by whatever measurements there are, you're not really allowed to say it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. So like what's beautiful is we're having a podcast right now and you're sharing some great stuff. If someone's listening and watching you open and close, in that moment, you know, right before it, you were very open. And then those little statements you said, the throwaway statements, like, oh, I don't know. And
I go back to that. What feels like it's happening is that it was getting to a point where I could get debunked or challenged by somebody else, maybe. And then the part, so I call it wounded part, but it's like the exiled part will get activated.
Yeah. So it's beautiful. Like in every conversation we have people, and especially like in sales or giving critical feedback or teaching, all of a sudden these parts come out and we can be in flow.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we kind of close.
Yep.
And it can create conflict. And all of it's going on without our awareness. So like when someone like myself listens, I'm constantly also, to me, I felt like a kick in the face because I was with you. And I'm like, this is really good. And then like I always felt, oh, what was that?
The other part just jumped in, right? Yeah.
And then if you notice, when we kind of got to it, all of a sudden you started to go, because you've done a lot of work on yourself, obviously, down to the origin story, right? Kind of like my emotions, my culture, my parents that one time or whatever. And it's like, we could talk about you for 10 hours, but if you just listen and you find the part where someone goes from completely open to all of a sudden like, watch it, you can then go straight down to like that next step of evolution, right?
Yeah.
It's like a laser. And sometimes people aren't ready yet. And I call it the 3 lies. Like if you point out to someone, like, hey, I think you just closed a little. Like, oh, no, I didn't close. Right? And that's like the first lie.
Yeah.
And then if you kind of give it some space, and what I've learned is that's not like, no, you did close. It's like, okay, well, let's slow down a bit. You know, what were you feeling? I wasn't feeling anything, you know, or, oh, I was thinking this, but it's like, okay, but that's not a thought. Let's slow it down. And little by little, you start to get to like the semi-conscious, like, oh, I was feeling a lot of potential being ashamed. And I had to like let out some of that. Diffuse, right?
Which especially for, I don't know, I could just say for myself, where a lot of my humor can come from. Because I'm pretty funny. But it'll be done as a diffusing, I can almost diffuse almost anything.
It's a superpower.
It's probably because I had to do it a lot when I was young. You just get good at it.
It's a superpower that allows you to achieve all the things you've achieved. And it's a super protection.
Yeah.
For what?
It's just, it's absolutely protector.
Yeah. I look at it like this. Like people that laugh a lot, tell a lot of jokes, tell a lot of stories. And at first you're like, oh, wow, we're really bonding. Then at some point you're like, wait a minute, what's happening? The result is this.
Yeah.
And what's really crazy is, and I'll speak for myself here, the people who are the most successful, who are trying to do the biggest things, you know, like I dropped out of college, 23, raised $9.8 million of venture capital from like Barry Wyman, Ron Higgins, a bunch of other people that were all the top investors, both in Hawaii and in Silicon Valley. And I needed that external validation for whatever reasons to not feel like my wounds. And so it's not always true, but it's most likely true. The more ambitious, the more external accolades, oftentimes at least part of the motor, the motivation, the energy, the things that allow you to get through the freaking suffering. Raising venture capital is suffering. High growth startups, suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It's just terrible. But the internal suffering of not having something external that's as big or bigger is motivation enough to get through any suffering. So for every person's superpower, there's usually a super protection that's allowing you to get through all of the suffering of whatever you're doing.
So what's some history or some context, if you felt comfortable sharing, that will give us context into where that drive would come from? What need is it? Where that need comes from? What's the origination story of that?
Well, I think it's both personal and legacy.
Okay.
Legacy, had hardworking parents, hardworking grandparents. Before that, they were farmers in the Midwest and then Germany. So there's like a lot of pride in working hard, getting results, being the best you can be. But then there's also me. I learned how to read in 3rd grade, and most people learn to read sometimes kindergarten, I think, for the second time. And so I always felt smart, but my brain would kind of close. My body would close in tests, in reading. And so I had this conflicting thing where I felt like I was tracking people and things that were going on, but I couldn't read. And then later in life, I'd go into a test, and before a test, I would teach people how to do the math problems. And then in the test, I would bomb, I'd close, and then they would all get better than me, even though I taught them how to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of had this like sense of that I was great or good, but I didn't have the results externally. And I was like, I need to find a way. Also just like how to connect with other people, from an early age, in my culture, it's like intellectually connecting. And so I wanted to intellectually connect through accomplishment. But I've learned I'm kind of a lone wolf. Like, I don't know, I probably have overactive parts that it's hard to connect emotionally. And so when I'm doing like a business plan and recruiting someone who, getting them, really excited about what we can build together, that's how I connect. So yeah, I think there's like kind of some legacy to it. And also just my brain is a little bit wired differently.
Does it feel like once you are showing like that accomplishment, because you already know the materials, and then it's like a freeze up kind of, right? That there's some consequence of some sort, that if you showed that, then there'd be a consequence that would be painful. Is that what it feels like?
Yeah. So a panic attack is fear of having a panic attack, or it's like, if you're not afraid of a panic attack, you won't have a panic attack. For me, it was like the fear of going blank would then make me go blank.
Here's what what happens a lot of times, at least for me in general, is once parts go live, once parts get activated or so on, it'll resonate at the same point. Let's say that the child's part of like shame goes live, parent's part of shame goes live. A lot of times I see it's the same. And then what happens is the parent says, unconsciously is going, I shut this child down, I shut mine down at the same time. The thing that is interesting to me on this one is that whatever that is that you're talking about feels very resonant to what mine is that I was referring to, that you saw, and so on. Mm. And what happens a lot of times is we'll externalize it so that we can solve it. So when you say like, oh, in the work situation, it comes up that this happened in the past and so on, that's a lot of times how we find partners, is because we'll externalize it. This person looks and is energetically like whatever caused my wound, because I'm going to depend on that person to help me heal that wound, and they can't because they have the same issues.
Or opposite.
Right.
So fit perfectly together.
Right. So that's why I'm like, oh, this is such an interesting one, because I felt a settling in my own system. When yours were going, it's like, this almost is an externalization of the same part, looking to try to find some balance and so on. I don't know. It's interesting. That's why I'm asking on that. Is I have the same piece, right? Which is like, I dominate this. I know this stuff. I know. And then it's like, I can't do it. Like, what the hell's going on? Yeah. I got to back off of it because there's some consequence that's coming. Almost like after I broke my back, there was no bending, lifting, or twisting. because the vertebrae was broken on the spinal cord. So any bending, lifting, or twisting could potentially move the vertebrae and then cut my spinal cord. Wow. So I'd be paralyzed from kind of the waist down, right? There was no bending, lifting, or twisting, right? But if you do that for 6 or 8 months or whatever, all of a sudden now that's a program in your system that there's no bending, lifting, or twisting. And after, when it was all healed up, I can't bend, lift, or twist, right? So on stuff like that, it's that kind of response, which is, I know I'm good at this stuff in, logically theory, but I feel myself pulling back automatically from that kind of almost like a muscle guarding.
Yeah.
That's why I'm kind of excited. I was like, oh, what you're describing it was like resonating with my system. I don't know.
You just said, I don't know again, and then said, Jeff.
Exactly, right? So now it's like almost like a pickleball game to an extent, where it's mind going, you're noticing it. Okay, that helps me to focus on it. And then you're going, and then I'm noticing it. And then it's, you know what I mean? It's almost like a pickleball game.
Yeah, it's funny. You asked me earlier, like, how would you characterize yourself? And I said, weird. And it's because, for whatever reasons, I'm always kind of tracking this kind of thing.
I'm doing it too.
Right. And when you're with someone that wants to track that, it's amazing. You can completely go deep and then high and then wide. And it's like, here's what we're talking about, but here's our parts going. And when I'm talking about my part, or you see myself going into a part, you can almost relax. And we're having a very full stack conversation. What I have found in my life is I usually want to have that with everyone, but not everyone wants to do that. In fact, some people are like, no.
Yeah.
F you, and if you try to have that conversation with me, I'm going to shut you down. And
that's common.
I'm very stubborn, and so I would try to have those conversations with people close to me, whatever. And so now my compromise is finding a wife that wants to have that kind of conversation, having clients that, and I like to say with people, like for my sales coaching and executive coaching, it's okay to come with me with greed and fear. You're afraid your deals aren't going to, close, you're afraid your company's not going to grow. But because the greed and fear is so big, they're actually willing to look in every single place to find the way to unlock their personal power. And then that allows them to start to track the full stack. Working with them, the 3 lies, it's like, no, I don't do that. And then you kind of breathe into it. And it's like, okay, well, I do it, but I do it for this reason. Okay, let's slow it down, breathe into it. Oh, it's also this reason. They breathe into it, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's a part that thinks I'm going to die if I don't do this, and it's weird. But I think every single person is having a full stack experience and conversation and interaction with people, but they're not aware of it.
So when you say weird, like, what if it's not weird? Because when I hear you saying it, it's not weird to me.
That you don't know you're weird. So weird is like a statistical thing, right? Okay. Meaning, if you're around a bunch of people who don't have the full stack experience, you're weird. If you collected all the weird people like us, and there's a few people that aren't having the full stack experience, they're weird. It's a statistical, analysis type thing. It's relative.
It's interesting too. I think it was Donovan K. Aloha too who mentioned this to me. He said he was looking at some book and he was talking about how entrepreneurs, a lot of them grew up in chaotic environments, or like emotionally chaotic environments, so that they're either comfortable with that or always looking to kind of more or less fix it and so on. And I kind of find I would categorize myself as an entrepreneur. I'm not like the giant. See, here we go, right? I'm going to qualify it and say I'm not giant like this and that, but, relatively not bad. I always can spot them. Almost like you can spot like a Hawaii person at SeaWorld and you go, that's a Hawaii person. Yeah. They have a cooler. They came in late. They're in the tops eating food they snuck in. Look at their shirt and slippers. And you look at each other and just like, you know what I mean? It's like, you already know.
What school you go? What year?
Yeah, you already know, right? But it's kind of like that. That's why I kind of tend to like the entrepreneurial group in general, because everybody's somewhat neurodivergent and got some stuff going on. And guarantee they almost all have some type of trauma, because otherwise, how do you have that kind of drive?
I have a theory. We all have trauma. And again, trauma is just the inability to be present and have full range of emotions, thoughts, sensations, whatever. And it's projecting an external situation and reacting from like a program, like a rule from when we were young. We all have it, but I always laugh, entrepreneurs want to change the world. And like, if you watch the show Silicon Valley, the comedy, they always, they're like, I'm going to change the world. And it's just overused. But my theory is that entrepreneurs are the ones, oftentimes, and I've been a founder my whole life, so I'll put myself in this situation, in this category, they want to change the world because the world as it is painful to them.
Yeah.
They need the world to change. And they need to be part of the force that does it.
Yeah, it's like easier to do it that way.
Yeah.
It's easier to change the world than
Yeah.
go and heal your own stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Give them a beach, give them just paradise and stuff, and they're going to start to find what's wrong with something here or elsewhere. And their brain is creating worlds. Why? Because this world, the present moment, is too painful. And there are entrepreneurs that see that and get that. And there's ones that will fight you tooth and nail, that's not them.
Like what percentage would you say of the ones that you deal with?
I don't know the percentage, but because I focus so much on the deal and then we get into the principles and they see it impacting their deal and then they come back and they see it impacting with their spouse and stuff.
Yeah.
I think people are born again when I work with them. Well, I can say this. I would say at least 50% of my recent clients that are usually like AI founders, and oftentimes they're in their 20s, sometimes they're older, sometimes 40s and 50s. They actually will say, we've talked to 3 to 5 coaches, and some of them were strong. They were like more on the therapy side, like the emotional part of sales. Some of them were strong like on the technical, methodology, process, skills. And we thought we had to decide, but you got like both. And so just the fact that they have that awareness that there's different kinds of coaches and different aspects and are able to like experience what I do and say, oh, it's both. I'm always like, oh my God. So
it's the younger ones.
Yeah.
The younger ones pick it up. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Younger meaning like the 20s ones.
Yeah.
Or even the 40s, I guess, but like, no, more closer to 20s.
Yeah. So it's coming. And I once was coaching a drone company in Redwood City. This is a Stanford guy. And I come in and I just like, I'd never coached on drones before, but I have first principles, both in terms of sales and last principles into like the whole psychology. And I just came in and I sliced and diced everything. And he was probably in his 20s or 30s and he had a guy in his 50s that was kind of operational. And I just come in, don't talk about my background much and just like slice and dice. And they're like, oh my God. And the guy looked at me and he's Stanford, and he's like, how do you know all this stuff? And I just felt into it and I just looked at him and was like, well, connecting with myself, the moment, and other people has never been easy. I have a nervous system that kind of opens and closes. And, early on, I started to find ways to kind of connect to love, feel love. And it turned out that they're the exact same skills that make you a great salesperson. I just stopped and looked at him and he was just like, I did not expect that answer, but it feels pretty true. Like, yeah. And so there's more people who are ready to talk about this. And even though that guy wasn't quite ready, when you lay it out, it's like a seed. People start to go, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then some people go back unconscious. They just, the full stack of awareness, they kind of are like, wow, yeah, I get that. And then I'm back here.
Yeah.
But other people, it's like, oh my God, we've been hitting our head for 12 months on sales. And then you taught me this and I see that I close and I don't close and I can see the buyers close. And then I help them open themselves and make good decisions. And they start to read the books. They start to go to therapy and they didn't have a goal to go to therapy. Probably, some of them thought it was crazy. I have one client that's afraid to tell other people he's going to therapy.
There's probably a lot of people like that.
Yeah. And for me, it's heartbreaking because when you watch people, how they work, overwork or don't work with the performance they could have, they eat bad food, they overeat, their relationships, they hold their loved ones away. They use their work as an excuse to not be present with them, with themselves, their kids. It's brutal out there. It's sad. Now, I read a book recently about the growing overuse of therapy. And, people are no longer resilient because they just want to talk about their feelings. So it's a spectrum.
I can understand that.
But there's so many people who are so closed to certain things. And I've had to learn not to point it out unless someone's asking. And so that's why I like my coaching, is because it's a professional situation where they're actually asking, hey, I'm not satisfied with something in my life. I've tried everything. I've heard you can help me. And it's like, okay, great. But yeah, it's brutal out there.
What were the books that you mentioned? You said they read books. Like, what would be the top books?
It really depends on where they are in their journey.
How about your books? Like for you?
So a deep end book is The Drama of the Gifted Child. And it's timeless. It's like, I think it was in the 50s or 60s or something. And the title throws people off. It's actually, I think, written in German or some other language, and it's a bad translation. I think it's called Prisoners of Childhood. And basically the premise of the book is for kids, for whatever reasons, couldn't form their own internal sense of self, but had to know themselves through other people's self, their feelings, their emotions, their needs. And because of that, they can be like anything for anyone, but they don't know who they are. There's just like a bunch of different parts of that, but the net is that they typically will spend their life oscillating from either grandiosity, which is like trying to start a huge company, go public, be the best person in this, win these awards, be beautiful, be perfect, or depression. And there's some people who they're just depressed. Some people, though, are like, I've never been depressed. I'm always gung-ho. But it's because the depression is so scary at a very semi-conscious or unconscious level that they never allowed themselves to get depressed.
But they're not aware.
They're just cranking full speed ahead no matter what.
They could just be not aware.
What's that?
They could just be not aware too and say, I'm not this or what, and then everyone else like, oh, what are you talking
Yeah,
about?
exactly. So some aren't aware. Others
or
are
what?
constantly like, I'm going to start this company. I'm going to become a venture capitalist. I'm going to, do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to now, and it's like, it's just one thing after the other. And so that book kind of gives you a roadmap. And the antidote is just to go back and see things as they were in the past.
What do you mean?
That for whatever reasons, you didn't get what you needed at certain times of your life. And that opportunity is gone. And so what happens is you start to project and try to get those things you never got in all of your interactions with people. And so that's the whole trauma of the past being projected onto the present and then trying to get whatever it is you didn't
What if it's someone else's that was put onto you? That's actually not your experience.
Like what?
Generational trauma. Generational becomes developmental, becomes generational, becomes developmental, right? So there's a doctor at UCLA. I think he's at UCLA now. It's Brian Diaz. Have you seen this one? He studies how trauma is passed through the DNA through offspring. They'll take a bunch of rats and then they'll shock them, right? So they get these adverse effects. And then they'll have them smell this aroma. Then they get to the point where when you smell the aroma, the mouse will have the adverse effect without the actual shock, right? And then then they'll mate the rats, they'll separate the rats, and then the female rat gives birth, and then they'll raise it, and then they'll separate again. That's my understanding. And then they'll have that baby rat that's now a mature rat smell the aroma, and then guess what happens?
Yeah.
It has an adverse effect higher than the parent, but it would never have met the parent.
Yeah.
So it would never know why it has that adverse effect. It follows it down where it was like offspring of people during the Holocaust or things like that, and how there could be protections in place, especially put into there developmentally or culturally after, along with that now we're reacting and protecting against things that aren't actually our experiences.
Yep. And I think technically it's epigenetics. Is that right?
So the epigenetics, my understanding is like how the genes will basically express themselves due to an environmental kind of stimulus or not.
Yeah.
This was like, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it's a part of that too, but it's basically like you don't have to experience it to know.
Yeah.
Like something's up with my mom or my grandmother or something. I feel the same. I don't know why, but I do it like that.
Absolutely. So I've seen some of those reports, and the ones that I've read is it's epigenetic. It's how the genes will express, and that expression could be passed on to offspring in that way.
The other thing I was wondering on that too is because when you mentioned that you could take that test early childhood and then you would freeze up and so on, or that's my own words, that almost felt like that to me, that it's not yours. I don't know, but that's kind of the sensing that I was getting from it. Because part of me that's kind of trying to figure things out, it's like a lot of times if the parts are really, if they're really young, it's nonverbal. People will be like, I can't put this into words. And it's like, yeah, because no more words.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of words is a baby giving you? It's just feelings, whatever, you know what I mean? But when it's passed down generationally too, it's like, I don't know how to even explain it sometimes. I just know it's there. It affects me and I have no idea why. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that resonate or?
Yeah. I mean, there's, as a kid, I always wondered why, and because we're humans, like in health, like what's the right diet? You don't know because there's so many, it's multivariant. I think the psyche is the same way. Like, where did it come from, right? There's so many different factors and some of them could be legacy. It's just hard to really know.
Passed down generationally.
Yeah. Which could be both epigenetic, it could be cultural.
We all.
Yeah. It could be, by what people say or by not what they say, but how they make you feel. One thing that's always captured my curiosity, imagination is we're so in our experience that sometimes it's hard to even imagine that someone else is having the same kind of doubts, two kinds of, like, oh yeah, we're getting along, but like internally I might be like, what a jerk. And I think they call it theory of mind, but it's like, it's hard to really put yourself in someone else's world. And I don't know, for me, I've always done that. I'm always wondering like, what are they thinking? And what is it like to be them? And I've learned that's kind of weird. A lot of people walk around with thinking like all of their internal world insecurities are unique.
Yeah.
And they're not.
Yeah, they're definitely not. I'm almost wondering today if the reason that I invited you here was to be able to more or less project my own internal parts onto you and utilize you as my proxy. I mean, that's kind of almost what I'm feeling like, you know what I mean?
Let's do it.
I mean, that it's going back and forth that way, right? The intensity I know when I'm like having to figure out yours is coming from something inside of me. You know what I mean?
Say that again?
I said the intensity that I feel of having to figure out what's going on in you is something going on inside of me.
Yeah.
Right? So it's typically like something that we don't like about, so we'll typically like try to judge, or I mean, I can just mean, judge externally somebody else for the parts of me that I don't really accept. So I can project out more or less onto you externally in order to kind of be able to see it and fix it in you. Because if I fix you, I fix me. Kind of how the piece works.
It's very well-known piece.
Yeah.
Meaning I'm very familiar with it myself.
Okay. Yes.
From doing it.
So that's why I'm wondering, I'm like, because you asked me last night, you're like, how do I prepare for this and this? I don't know. In the past, I could have given you questions because it would have been tactical stuff. But essentially, we come into this container and what shows up is kind of how it's been. And realistically, a lot of it is proxy for me search and what's going on in me and so on. That's realistically what's going on under the surface. So yeah, I'm
a firm believer that like startups, like founders, they're really just finding themselves, and what company they create is kind of,
it's like a mirror image or the projection, right?
Yeah,
it's like the film of the past, the projector of the present, and then the projecting image is the future. Yeah Interesting. But that piece, there's something in there that a part of me is holding on yours, which is, I can do this math stuff and so on, and I will stop. And another part is, I don't know if it's the same one or what, is basically like, well, that could potentially help me because I have been for years talking about doing various workshops and groups in this kind of like healing-ish / business, kind of space. The part of me that knows like the technicality stuff knows I'm good at it. It knows I can do this. I'm fully capable. I have more than enough contacts and resources. I have a venue and I still don't do it. So it's like, so this is an ongoing piece. The one that's trying to get me through it constantly looks at yours is like, well, what's going on with his one? Because you've solved his one and then you can solve your one. That's what I'm noticing, at least in my own self.
When I coach people, I oftentimes will learn more from them than I teach them.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe that to be able to coach someone deeply, you need to learn their world, And before you give advice or a tool or something, you need to almost, this is extreme, but like become them.
Yeah, I was saying energetically sharing the same energy.
Yeah.
Their release is your release.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
in that process, it's very much personal. And it's like to fully understand someone, you have to understand how their world is engaging with your world. And, the way that they are will teach you how you are. If they've been able to have an awareness in some place in their life and you haven't, you all of a sudden go, oh my God. And I think that's where mastery of a coach comes from, is the opening up. I think that on the other side of the spectrum, coaches that are like, I have this methodology, I have all this, I'm going to tell you how it is. And then they leave the coaching session without changing, without opening, without transforming. That's the bad end of the stick, And I think the same.
I guess it depends on what they're trying to do, right? Because it's like that's kind of the quandary, the polarization I've been with too. Is that a lot of times, if somebody is coming to me for, I want to get ahead of my career or so on, and then I'm noticing like, oh, well, the block seems like it's in this kind of emotional area or this part, and so on. My tendency a lot of times is to move very quickly into the emotional piece because that's what I'm doing on my own. I figure, okay, unconscious, like they're doing it too, but the speed only moves at the speed of trust and their own system. And then sometimes it'll get kind of caught up in like, wait a minute, I just want to get stuff done, right? Versus I want to heal into this area. And then I had other ones where it's like complete opposite. It was like I started to try to coach that person on stuff, and they're like, dude, no, I just want to do the emotional things. It's like, what the heck is going on around here? Oh my gosh,
And I think that's the dance, right? That's like the, speaking from a part and for a part, right? And if the main goal is the interview, like being able to maintain the interview container and being aware of parts, but not driven by the parts. Like same thing in the coaching where it's like, the more that I'm aware of my parts, interacting with their parts, that's such good information. But there's like, what's the container and its presence, right? It's like, do they need a solution or do they need to just be seen?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, that's
mostly the latter.
Yeah. And it's like, do they need a solution so that they relax and then they show themselves to where they can be seen?
Yeah.
And that's the dance, right? Like that's on the path to mastery. It's that. It's almost like putting your protections down so that you can feel your parts, but they don't jump in and they're at the wheel. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I find my best work with people is when they're kind of trusting and showing their parts, and then I can see my parts and I'm informed by both. And then I can breathe and I'm then like, where do I have an agenda? And it's like, okay, agenda's out. My agenda's out. What's here and how can I be present to that? Yeah.
I know for myself, whatever holds me back from getting these groups going, it's a ebb and flow, right? At some points it's like, Garen's, I can do this. And then other times it's like, I don't know, I'm scared to do this.
Yeah.
But the fear really is based on nothing. I have more than enough external validation and internal validation that I know exactly what I'm doing. But I stop, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so have you ever started to do the things you need to do to make it happen and then stopped doing those things?
All the time.
Okay, can you bring yourself back to the most recent or the most significant one?
I would say that I had opportunity to do this started doing groups with another organization. And we went through one. It was challenging because I think that the group participant mix, the expectations weren't fully on the same line. There wasn't a lot of like prep of this is what we're going to be doing. So there's some people in the group that had, we want to come here to do more openness healing. Others kind of like, I'm not even sure why I'm here and so on. So that first meeting I think was a bit challenging, although I'm pretty sure on the next one that it wouldn't have been challenging because we made some pretty good breakthroughs on that. And then I let a long time period, months and months go by. I mean, granted, I had stuff going on, but, I let it kind of slide.
Can you go to the exact moment where you stopped doing what you know you needed to do?
It would be where one of the participants in the group was like making jokes. We're trying to lead through a certain exercise and the person was kind of making jokes, something along the lines of that.
Can you remember right before the jokes or right before the jokes got to you, what you were feeling or
Yeah, like, oh crap, I'm not sure if we're doing it on this, right? Like, it's like, this is hard today. I mean, I can remember thinking, oh, this is hard. I'm having a hard time moving into that settled kind of flow feeling with this group. I'm feeling pockets of it, but this person is making it problematic for me to move the group as a group.
Do you remember how it made you feel, like sensations, emotions?
Yeah, I was getting anxious in terms of like nervous, started to feel some fear of, oh, this is going to go badly and I'm going to look bad. Then that brings up shame, which is like, oh, I'm a bad person and this is going to fail. And then if I fail, then I'm a bad person. If I don't meet expectations, I'm a bad person. So all leading into shame, I would say.
Yeah. And shame is I'm a bad person. I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm wrong. Something's bad.
Yeah.
Like a moral judgment.
And so that's good. Really good awareness, being able to answer these kind of questions in this way. And what options did you see available in that moment?
My initial response, which is, the one that comes reactively from history, is make an example out of this. So everyone else falls in line, which would be completely opposite of the environment needed for the type of work that was supposed to be done. So that I didn't. And then, I'm not sure when it happened or if it happened or so on, because, emotional memory is not always exact. But there was a point where I could see or I could sense this person's parts that was just really needing some compassion. And in particular, a person, I think, got it. Because by the end, that was the biggest validation to me that, oh, what we just did here today, basically what they came to at the end and so on, and the shift that occurred or seemed to occur, I was like, that's worth it. That was worth the whole day just for this one person's shift because it was big, really, really big. But I think to me, it feels like when you were bringing me into that, the situation of the shame that would be popping up was, I could feel like on the left side of my body was the piece that's holding me back.
And it seemed like the options that you had, one was to take full responsibility for it not going the way you thought it should go.
It could, yeah, I didn't say anything like that. And as I was debriefing with the team after, it's like, I can't remember where I don't take responsibility.
Yeah, you took full responsibility.
Yeah.
So you came into a difficult situation. That's why you were there.
Which is kind of the beauty of a lot of this too, right? Is a part of me is afraid that in a challenging situation, it will go badly. And then the repercussion of that is shame and feeling and stuff like that. And then I have other parts that are look, you need to be in an intense situation to make this worth it for your time, just to even bother. I almost feel like it has to be these big shifts a lot of times to feel like, oh, that was worth it. And it's almost like, to me, surfing bigger waves, the consequence is higher if you wipe out or stuck in the wrong spot, but the rush is also bigger when you're riding it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're seeking out dysfunction. Maybe there's a part that needs dysfunction to feel alive.
Yeah.
But also your whole offering is to help dysfunction. So to expect that there won't be dysfunction.
Yeah.
Or to take it on as, okay, there's dysfunction here. It's me. Right?
I enjoy and don't enjoy conflict. You know what I mean? I don't know if you know. I even sometimes create it. I find myself in the past of creating it just to diffuse it. It's that movement or something that is somehow very settling.
Yeah.
I saw you kind of moving with something come on. You had an aha experience or something was going there.
Well, I mean, it's the whole thing, right? It's
this is part of me deflecting too also, but I was seeing something too, so.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is like you were saying earlier, I see myself too. I run into dysfunctional moments, wanting to have shock and awe and be like, wow, that's amazing. And then all of a sudden confronted with a really big problem where no matter how good I am, their parts is I'm shutting this down.
Mm-hmm.
And where it took me a long time, but at some point it's oh, wow, perfect. This is telling me everything I need to know. And we're going to fall down the mountain together. but we're now going to be intimate with that mountain. We're going to know every step to take and not to take to get back up, right? And so it's how not to take responsibility for how bad it is and how bad it looks, because that's part of what you're coming in to solve, right? Like to not take it personal. I've taken so many things personal.
Yeah.
Until I didn't. Mm-hmm. And like my willingness to fail.
Was that recent or?
So for me to kind of build my confidence in sales coaching, well, I got mentored a lot. Barry Wyman, Ron Higgins, mm-hmm. Charlie Bass, a bunch of amazing people. And that really got me to mentor. But I also found that when I mentor, I'd learn a lot. And so to become real confident as a sales coach for founders, I would mentor at like the Founders Institute. And you would give like a 15-minute talk, and then you might judge their pitches and such. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty frequently. And I would go to present, and I would either show up in total flow and just be connected to the audience, leaning in, they'd lean in, there'd be gasps, or I wouldn't even remember anything.
Yeah.
Completely blank. Too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And having slides is worse for me because it's like, what's on the next slide?
I know, that's the worst.
Preparing is worse for me. It's like if I go to the slides and I do it perfectly once, I'm like, what if I don't do it that way? And once I would get to question and answers, I'm like, I know my shit. Question and answers is like nothing. So it's just like the planned presentation. So I would partially use it to just get the reps in. And I once went, and for whatever reasons, I was trying to fit too much into too small, and I bombed. I mean, I was just like, I was up there at some point, just wanted to be like, time out.
Yeah.
And I got through it. And afterwards, there was a guy that was really supportive. I'm like, how was it? And he was just like, you survived it. I mean, it was legitimately bad. And what was crazy was afterwards, we all went to, one of the Silicon Valley startup bars and had drinks, and people still asked me great questions. I gave them answers. We built the network, advised some of them. One became a customer. It was like, it was great. And I remember going, my worst nightmare happened. I went completely blank in front of probably 50 founders. I think Adeo was there. He's a charismatic leader, Founders Institute. And I was okay. People still liked me. People still got value. I still was able to, get good business. And there was something in my nervous system that relaxed and said, like, failure isn't death. Like, remember the conscious, semi-conscious, unconscious? Unconscious, failure is death to me.
Yeah.
Total destruction and annihilation. And I'm walking into a presentation and my heart goes like this and I go blank. What I've found in the last few years, because of experiences like that, as well as experiences where I was in flow, I'm now less like that. And I have trust that something's going to come. And even if it bombs, we're all going to learn something from that bombing. Maybe there's someone listening that struggles from the same thing and they go, wow, he bombed, but nothing went bad. And then they built the confidence. So yeah, that truly bombing and realizing that I was fine has helped a lot in my confidence in doing this.
Can I ask you something on that?
Yeah.
So the phrase when it's like failure is death,
yeah,
right? Whose phrase is that? It's originating from somewhere.
Yeah.
Is that you or is that somebody else's?
It's probably a combination. And the reason why I say that is, I've been surrounded by a lot of successful people.
Okay.
And the energy behind it is like all or nothing. So, you get that message.
So they're reinforcing it, the original signal.
I think there's a piece of that. But I think, when we go that full stack of awareness, it's like failure isn't like not succeeding.
Okay.
It's like not being loved. It's like not belonging. It's not being connected. It's not having your needs met, right? And so it's bigger than success.
Okay, so if you don't go to thought on this one,
yeah,
and it's that failure is death.
Yeah.
It originates somewhere and then it comes in and then it kind of manifests in your system, right? Like it's like I take it on now. But wherever it originates from, if you're witnessing it, that, like, where is it coming from? Not going to thought.
So when I was, 23, I raised $9.8 million from some amazing people. And when I would be walking to a pitch,
okay,
I would feel dread. Like intellectually, I'm excited about what I want to share. There's times where I'm in flow and it's great, but the sensations in my body would be the same sensations that I would expect someone walking to an execution line.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Tell me what you've seen.
Like somebody walking to an execution line. The somebody, not you though. Somebody as if you were them. So I keep bringing this up because I swear this feels legacy to me. Like this is passed down the same way like the mouse.
Yeah.
That's not yours. You know what I'm saying? You don't own it. It doesn't belong to you.
Yeah.
Which means that you can let it go.
I am letting it go.
Like fully easier than if it was actually yours.
Absolutely. And, you know, at different times in my life, and it's funny, you know, Ron Higgins, who did Digital Island, I raised my Series A from, who's a great mentor, you know, he would talk about like as CEO, you know, when everyone's up here, you got to be down here. When everyone's down here, you got to be up here so that you can have like an even keel so you can create a venture that's successful. And I think both him and I won't speak for him, but I was always able to do that because I was never really inside my experience. I always felt like I was in the room next door. And if something great was happening, I was aware of it, but I didn't really feel it. If something terrible was happening, I was aware of it, but I didn't really feel it. And so that kind of advice was like, yeah, that's how I do it. You know, when all other people are losing their head.
So it's like dissociated.
Yeah. So my adult life has been, how do I get back into my body? How do I open up my thoughts so I don't see the black or white thinking? I see the full spectrum of options and thoughts. How do I feel everything from, you know, shame, because there's a message in that, you know, as an awareness of like, oh, I'm in shame. Shame isn't a helpful feeling. To love, to fear, to anger. Those are all helpful feelings if you're feeling them. And, you know, to kind of get back so that I can feel, I can taste the fruit, juice of the fruit. You know, I can access the gold of life. And, you know, kind of full circle, like when I work with people, it's people who've been super successful, but they can't taste the juice. You know, they can't get to the gold. They thought it was the external success, and it's not. Mm-hmm. You know, the external success was an artifact, a manifestation, making external the conditions that are internal.
Interesting day today.
What's the meta reflection on today?
You know, what even does meta mean? Like, what's the overall kind of like arching?
Like metadata is data about data. Mm-hmm. Meta conversation is a conversation about the conversation. So like oftentimes, like if I'm interviewing someone for work, I'll be like, so it's really hard to know who to hire in a short amount of time. How would you go about, you know, interviewing yourself to help me and you know if we should be working together? Mm-hmm. So it's like bringing the conversation about the conversation in a way that usually is trapped behind our brains, our faces.
I don't know if this is meta so much, but it's like, to me, my main kind of thing that I'm considering or reflecting on is how much projecting to you from my own self, like I said, like a pickleball game. And then I'll deflect out and push back. You know what I mean? And it's almost like I'm settling into space to hold the space for you, because the more you get closer to it, you're helping me.
Have you enjoyed it? Not enjoyed it? Has it been difficult? Like, what's your experience?
It's more like session work than anything else. Yeah. I kind of feel like this would be helpful for people. I mean, for me, when I watch things and others can move into a vulnerable space where it's like not in the normal riff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That helps me. The interesting thing I noticed, though, and if you can take it back to like ancestral healing stuff, is that as I did like a bit of ancestral healing type of work, it clears the whole line up and down and sideways, which is kind of nice, if you ask me.
I've experienced, you know, that the whole, like when you heal yourself, you heal 7 generations before you.
No, it's the whole thing.
I experienced it.
Yeah.
And at first I thought it was just people who are kind of, you're in the Bay Area, I'm surrounded by all these people who are kind of spiritually bypassing, you know, and I thought they were just talking out there, but then I experienced it. Mm-hmm. And it was like, oh, and then the compassion, right? Because both people who are impacted by the negative of the past, as well as some of the people that created the negative in the past, you realize that it's a chain. Yeah. And when you break the chain, it's like
it's done.
It's done and it heals.
Yeah.
Like I was in San Francisco. I had a former client, their business started having a lot of problems just because just different changes in the market. People they were selling to were getting fired, that kind of thing. And, they were considering shutting down. And, I was meeting with them, and all of a sudden just words came to me to kind of be super supportive, whether they decided to shut down or not, but just really support them and their path. And, afterwards I left and I was going to another meeting, and all of a sudden I felt Barry. And it was all the things that he said and the quality of his love that he poured into me when I was going through ups and downs in my startup. He was a Series B investor. And it was almost like it was his words and he was talking through me, and I could feel that connection of 3 different generations. His founder's a lot younger. I started crying, and I could just feel the generations. And I know he was mentored. And so it was just like that veil, is that the right word? The separation of life and death and just people and generations. It was really thin, and it felt pure love, but there was a lot of sadness and grief too. So I just sat there I'm so lucky, and it was like a pure channel, of love.
It's beautiful. I think that's what I'm trying to get to on a more regular basis as well. The channel open, and the channel not being so constricted, just everything. You know what I mean? That's how I'm gauging. When you ask, that's my gauge. That's my only freaking gauge, almost.
It's so amazing. It's so interesting how similar we are. Both my purpose in life and my work that I do with others is essentially that. It's how can I remain open and present to whatever is happening? Full range of emotions, sensations, thoughts, instincts, and be present. And have an intimate relationship with the unknown as it's unfolding. And then when I work with clients, and especially in sales, it's how do I help them do that? Because when they do that, their genius comes out and they'll be successful. But it's it doesn't matter if it's sales or they're talking about their relationship with their spouse or having to have a candid conversation to fire someone or to admit they don't know and to go get help from someone. It's the ability to stay open, seeing things as they are, be in the here and now, and actually experiencing life and not closing because there's parts of us that feel like it's going to overwhelm us. Because our capacity is huge. And then once we do that, it's like a clear channel. And it's the most amazing thing. And the connection with self and other is so great. And I think a lot of us, I know me for one, went through a lot of my life closed.
Yeah.
And it's, our wound becomes our superpower because I had that thing where I would go from being in flow to forgetting my name, what's on the next slide. That kept this quest to even define the problem, to seek out solutions, and to feel like it's the key to everything. That allowed me to build the life that I have and to do the meaningful work that I do. And I'm now to the point where I'm almost thinking everything that happened to me in the past, things I got, things I didn't have, helped me get to be able to do this work with myself and others.
Yeah.
That'd be worth it. I wouldn't change a thing. That's been a long path.
How does your wife fit into all of this?
In terms of her relationship with Full Stack?
How long have you been married?
Well, it's funny. I think 3 or 4 years, but after a certain period of time, I felt connected forever. Yeah. And so I answered, when did I know? And when we decided to spend the rest of our lives together, it was 3 or 4 years ago.
I have this discussion with my wife too. It's we were together before, and then we decide we're going to be together again now. And I'm lucky that I found her early in this lifetime. Well, I guess that's why I asked that. Because she seems I wouldn't even say compliment to you. It's the same piece. You know what I mean?
It's funny. Her good friend, Tim Chang, my good friend, Mohana, they set us up. And I was going to go surfing in Costa Rica. And they like to match people up. And I'm I want to meet someone. They're oh, you're going to go surfing? I know the perfect person. She surfs, And I went online and to her Facebook page, and she's beautiful, a woman from India. She's a doctor. She surfs. And I'm just God, I hope she's weird. And that her weird matches my weird. Because there's no other explanation why she's not with someone else. And when we met, her weird matches my weird. And we're very different in some ways, but We really match. And the number one similarity is it's like instead of a trauma bond, it's like a trauma healing, right? Like we both meet each other where we're at. We were both kind of lone wolves our whole life. And we were able to open at the same time. And then we have both the desire to be full stack awareness in terms of remaining open and becoming aware when we're closing, and then supporting each other and holding each other accountable. So yeah, it works really well. But I think if we met each other like a couple weeks beforehand or a couple weeks afterhand, it wouldn't have worked. It was something cosmic. She's Indian, so we had like a Hindu ceremony, and they talk about Krishna connecting you and that this isn't your first life with each other. It's, and it felt that way, like you described it. And I would have rolled my eyes at anyone describing it the way that I just did. But it just seemed self-evident.
Yeah. These days, I kind of take my meetings and the way things go, just waiting to see what the universe unfolds for me, because I'm pretty aware that I'm pretty limited in terms of my awareness, like on this physical plane. And then normally it's afterwards, then I realize, oh, this is kind of why I'm here, right? Like the other day I went to something last minute and I was like, why am I here? And then I realized, oh, I'm there to talk to my friend about, what's going on with them. And so I've been, I think, transformational. So I'm always thinking of these things, right? Like, because I feel like in here, it's like, oh, this is an interesting mix of how this comes about and then where is it going and so on. And it feels like complete flow in it. It's flown by.
Yeah.
At least to me.
Yeah.
So did you ever get trained in IFS too?
So I'm a nerd. So I went and saw Dick present. I watched all the videos.
You went in person?
Well, I just did like him speaking at different events, and I read his books. I'm in IFS, so like I'm very intimate with it, but I don't have any formal training in it.
But your wife, did she do in-person training or she did online?
All remote.
Yeah.
And it's so intense, right? It's like
so
3
intense.
days, 6 times, 10 times. It's like hundreds of hours, right?
Yeah, I think it's 96 hours total. Yeah. But yeah, before I know, like...
But she does that and then PAs. She's PA'd it once or twice for each level.
Do you know which trainers that she was with, by any chance?
Primarily with Dick and Barbara, I think her name is. I always forget. Oh. But out of the Harvard Health Alliance or something.
Oh, really?
I forget what it is.
It's not Kripalu.
Not Kripalu, no.
Oh.
Who's your trainer?
My initial level 1 trainer, her name is Osnat Arbel, and she's in Israel. And then level 2's... I can't remember. I'm having one of those moments too. I know my level 3 was C. Sykes. My level 2 is Pam Krause. Both level 2s, Pam Krause. And then I've PA'd maybe 6 or 7 times, I think. But I tend to like PAing level 2s now.
Nice.
Least. Yeah.
Yeah, she just finished one of those.
So much less hard on your nervous system. Way less work.
Yeah, and you have less like people coming in like, I know IFS, and then they just...
Oh, God.
They're just the worst. You're just like...
It's not so much that. And actually, the thing is, because no one can get into the trainings, that typically people come in trained on other pieces. Actually, to me, it's kind of a little bit better on the part that they kind of have a more general, like, rote understanding. The hardest part of all of these models, like brain spotting or IFS or so on, is the relationship with our own parts is by far the most important piece. And that is missed a lot of times. I know I missed it.
So I have this theory, and I'll say that it says a lot about me too. So I say this with the self-awareness that a lot of therapists, coaches, teachers, they're on a path, and it's like, they have trauma and they want to heal, and it naturally brings them to like wanting to learn the skills, and then they become certified. And the best ones will continue to get certified and practice, but it's not to provide it to others. That it's like that plus to continue to expand and to do it for yourself too.
Yeah.
In other words, continuing to get to know your parts generally in the context of teaching and what's the next layer that you're not aware of yet. And so many people will stop at learning how to do it for other people, and it's far easier to do for other people than it is for yourself. And then there's this like limiting. They can only help people that haven't been yet to where they've been.
Yeah, you can't take people farther than where you're going.
Exactly.
Because your own parts won't let you.
Yeah, that's very wise.
They won't let you. They'll get triggered on it, and then you'll be over there trying to fix them. So are you familiar with how polarizations work in IFS, right? You have 2 parts that are polarized against each other. One polarization that is missed and I know I missed it, but I see it especially as a PA, or the program assistant, is the polarization between therapist and client's parts. So client's parts or therapist parts, one will get activated, and then the other one will activate, and they're going at it, and they don't notice it.
Yep.
And what happens then is once the therapist side can, tune in and then basically unblend, if possible, then the whole container changes and the client can do their work. But that's missed a lot of times.
So if I hear you right, it's when the client has parts that activate the therapist's parts.
Yeah, the parts that are polarized when we're talking about normally in IFS are like our own, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this part of me saying do it, this one's not, and they're protecting the same exile.
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is this part's saying something and the therapist one, and then it's like trying to go at it and it's not really aware. Or then what happens is this one cannot back down. It can't.
And the beauty is, for me, the best therapists, either they have the space and it doesn't happen, or they work with themselves, and that's a master class, seeing them work with themselves.
It is. That's where you're like, whoa. It's like,
yeah.
Was that magic?
And sometimes you learn a lot from a therapist where you hit their level of growth and you outgrow them. You know? And it takes some pretty good self-energy of yourself, because when that happens, there's often, they say certain things. And so I know for myself, whenever I have coaching, especially if there's like a hard coaching session, or even if it's a really great one, I then go to therapy and I'm like, hey, I helped someone with this. I think I have the same blind spot. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And then I go through it. And then whether it's the next time with them or just the next time it comes up, I now have brought more awareness to that blind spot. And so I can go further and, really hold the space. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I know with Geeta, she talks about it. They talk a lot about it, but I think people miss it. And it's the whole thing that we talked about early on is the 3 lies. It's like some people are consciously aware of when they're polarized with the client. Some people are only semi-aware, semi-conscious, where they feel something, but they think they can fix what's happening. They think that all of a sudden they have an agenda. So it's only semi-conscious, and then the unconscious. And so I think you can teach people it's about your own part as a therapist. But once the polarization is coming up, it's the amount of time and experience of recovering from that makes it possible for people to get it. That's why I think there's so many different levels of therapists, because that's a pretty big gap to fill.
I'm not a clinical therapist, but I think to me that's the hardest one that I see myself and others that I deal with kind of trying to resolve or not resolve.
I'll do a personal story about how I would do that as a coach. So for a while, I got to the point where I knew the methodology worked. It could work for any company, any stage, any type of seller. But everywhere I'd go, people would be like, oh, this will work in this industry, but not in healthcare. Okay. Or they'll say, oh, it can work in new deals, but not old deals. Right. It's too late to do it in this one. And what I found was everyone would have an excuse. And because I would figure out ways to get through the excuse, I would just kind of start to get super agenda'd, almost like rigid. And I would just power my way through it to get them to see. And it would be like contentious and it would not be fun. And then all of a sudden, la, 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 people would see and it'd be like, ah, ah, ah. And the irony was my parts would come up.
Oh, yeah.
Because someone was closing. My parts would come up. I would close. So my only options was to power through and get through and destroy whatever's in my way for them. But no, it was for the parts that didn't want to fail. The parts that were know-it-alls who wanted to be right. And I had brought in kind of an intern to kind of watch, and he pointed out, he's like, dude, and he was able to tell me what I was doing. I was like, oh my God. And he helped me. And it's like the next time it happened, same thing. But when someone came up, I stopped and I said, hey, I'm becoming aware that you're closing to what I'm offering. And that's perfectly okay. My question for you is, are you open to the possibility that you don't see something that I do? That you might not be doing this in a way that best serves you? And sometimes it was a negotiation, But that attitude, like that openness, it was like my possibility is bring into meta awareness and be like, are you open to opening to something new? Is that an option that you have here? If it is, I will share this with you. But if it's not, I'm fine here, because this is only going to work if you're open. And my success now wasn't, I'm going to teach them and they're going to get the result. My success was, I'm going to stay open. And that is going to be the best, fastest way to them either getting it or them realizing where the issue is. And so it's kind of back to your story. Once I started to get that, I was like, oh, I didn't have to leave myself to force something. And yeah, to me, that was like that moment where I felt like I grew, had mastery, not only my craft, but like the container. And ever since then, I felt like I can meet whatever arises in that container, because that part that used to try to push it through but would close in the process is no longer in control. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was noticing in myself when I was pushing on yours. It's like, oh God, here, I see it. And now it's coming. I could feel it in me. And I brought it up.
And what's interesting is like trusting your system, where it's like, if this was a coaching session, it would have been very different and we would have been exploring a bunch of stuff. You know, being a podcast, there's, you know, I'm consciously closed on certain things.
Gotta be.
And so like you were feeling it and us not talking about it, that probably really fed some parts also, you know. So just that dynamic is part of it.
Well, the thing on too is on podcast-ishness of stuff is I got to watch myself now too, because I'll automatically in the past would just go there and then it would end up being a full session. One in particular basically said to me, you know, afterwards, it wasn't explicit. It wasn't really clear. I kind of went into and I got caught up in it and so on. And I'm not angry, but, you know, you got to be more. That's why my stuff I send out, it's explicit. This is, you know, I'm on stuff and so on. And then I'll pause as needed. If I ever hear oh, this feels like a therapy session, we pause, which is often because my own parts and system wants to go there a lot of times. But that one made me a lot more cautious, I think is what the word is. Yeah, now. Yeah. More cautious.
Yeah. It's funny. We're very similar in a lot of different ways. I used to connect with people and feel like I was bonding if I could see what was their block, where are they closing, and then share it with them. It's fun. Right? I'd feel safe. I'd feel alive. I'd feel good. I'd feel valuable. Mm-hmm. And yeah, when I started to realize some people will hate you for it. Some people will become destabilized by it. And sometimes it's in service and sometimes there's a polarization. It's like, oh, I want to feel a certain way, so I'm going to do this. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute. I am not aligned fully, you know? So a lot of times, if I'm in a coaching session and someone says, wow, this is kind of feeling like therapy, it's like, okay, yeah, like you said, let's pause for a second. It might feel like it because it is.
If we're in the session, I just go.
What's that?
If we're in the session, we're just going. That's what's meant to be. But the podcast is kind of like, I thought I was coming here to talk about like real estate.
And in mine, a lot of people come to me for sales coaching and they're like, wow, this feels like therapy. And it's like, well, because we are getting to the areas that are sensitive and we don't have to talk about these things. And in fact, if this is helpful, I think getting a therapist can actually help a lot, because oftentimes some people aren't succeeding because they don't know what to do or how to do it. What to do and how to do it is really easy, right? Especially these days with podcasts and books and stuff. The hard part is actually doing it. And it's hard because our parts come up, you know, consciously, semi-consciously, unconsciously. And so to master anything, it's like you go from, okay, what do I do? How do I do this? But then it's like, okay, what does my system do to prevent me from doing these things in the right period, right moment, in the right way? And that's the work. It turns into therapy very fast at the highest levels.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was mentioning to you before, right? On my own kind of block for doing the workshops and stuff, and we went through it and so on. Same thing. It's not like I can't sell somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with my training and so on, I can sell, but I just don't.
Yeah. No, I can relate. And I'm a sales coach.
Yeah. Okay. So as we kind of come and land this thing, was there anything that you wanted to mention or talk about that we didn't?
I know it's easy sometimes to feel like this endeavor to know ourselves and to heal, it can be easy to get stuck in the past, right? It can be easy to try to blame. It can be easy for other people to think you're trying to blame them. But I think for me and the people that I work with, it's how do you let go of the past and be present and only go to the past to see like what cord is connected to me and how can I experience what I need to experience to let go. And yeah, for me, it's like I look to where the places I'm trying to perform that I'm not. And that's like the fastest path to find that next place that the past is interfering with the present. And for me, I don't care like why it is that way. What I care about is how can I open to it, experience it, and then be less driven by it, less controlled by it. So yeah, I was kind of rocked by that book that talked about people getting too much therapy, and being stuck in their emotions. And like, I do see there's like a spectrum when it's healthy to kind of go back and to talk about these things and process it. And when is it just trying to like get stuck in it?
Okay. Well, I just want to acknowledge you, Walter. Thank you for coming and sharing the space with me. I learned a lot. I experienced a lot. I believe that your clients are lucky to work with you. And if they can build stronger connections with themselves through your guidance and coaching, then it benefits everybody. So thanks.
Cool. I appreciate being here. You're innovating podcasting and IFS work and your personal path and the space. I can feel it. Like you've gone deep and you haven't left many trailheads unexplored. And that's rare these days.
I'm not sure on that one. We'll see. Yeah.
If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.